Hi biologists! Okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at conservation, and there's a couple of examples that you need to know about. We're going to look at food security, decomposers, and how food can be preserved. So first of all, what is conservation? Well, conservation is when humans actually make an effort to protect the environment or particular species within the environment. And why is that important? Well, we have a human right to protect species and make sure that they don't become extinct. We also have a selfish reasons for doing it because obviously, as I've said before, we use plants and animals to provide us with food and to provide us with medicines. Maintaining the environment also helps the environment to cope if there are natural disasters. For instance, if a region that used to have woodland is then the woodland is removed, if there is flooding in that area, then it's just going to wash that soil away. Whereas actually, if we have trees and tree roots there, it's going to hold the soil together and the area will be much more likely to be able to recover. The first example that you need to know about is the Kielder Forest. So the Kielder Forest is found in the north of England, right up next to Scotland. And in 1800, the forest had actually been destroyed and had been replaced with moorland. And so now there's a large conservation effort to reforest the area. And if you were to visit now, you would find that there are lots of conifer trees, deciduous trees, they're the ones that lose their leaves, and lots of open areas. And by bringing in lots of trees and lots of open areas, what that means is that we've increased the range of habitats available, and that has increased the number of species living in each of those areas. A couple of other examples of conservation projects they've done is that they have built nesting platforms in the tops of tall trees to encourage ospreys to nest, and they've also kill any grey squirrels that enter the region. And the reason for that is that the red squirrel is the native population of the UK, but the grey squirrels were introduced from North America and they compete with the red squirrels and they're able to outcompete them. And so the population of red squirrels in this country is quite small, and so we are conserving the numbers in that region. The final example that you need to know is about the South China tiger, and their numbers are decreasing for several reasons. One, because their habitat is being destroyed, but also because those tigers are being hunted and they are being killed because they are moving onto farmland and attacking farm animals. So what people are doing is that we are now breeding those tigers in captivity, such as in zoos, to start to increase their numbers again, because their population is actually now quite. So the next part you need to know about is food security. And food security means having access to enough safe and healthy foods at all times. And of course, there are reasons why this isn't the case with populations around the world. So let's look at those reasons. There are 5 that you need to know about. The first one is the human population is massively increasing. In 1960, the human population was 3 billion. Now it's 7.5 billion, and it's not evenly spread around the world. If you look at the graph on the right here, that you can see there's been a massive increase in the population in China and in India. And actually what we're talking about here, is there enough food in those regions, clean and healthy food, to feed that population and to feed the increasing population? Number 2 is that food types that are being consumed are changing. As countries become more wealthy, they tend to eat more fish and meat, but at the moment there isn't enough fish and meat to go around. So how are we dealing with that? How are we going to change people's eating habits, or how are we going to make sure there's enough food available, fish and meat available for those people to eat? Last lesson we talked about fish farming. That is one way that we can increase the amount of fish available for consumption. Some people feel that we ought to move to plant protein, for instance, as an alternative. Numbers 3 and 4 here, reasons why there is food poverty in some parts of the world, is that we have regions where there's conflict and we have regions where countries are poorer than others. That means that the people in those countries simply do not have enough money to be able to purchase food, or they're in a conflicted region, which means that they've had to move away from their farmland or the area that they lived, and now they are living in camp situations where they are dependent on being provided food, perhaps by charities or other organisations. Number 5 is the use of crops. It's actually use of fertilisers on crops. The problem with this is that we use fertilisers to increase the growth of the crops, and that has worked up to now. And actually, there's been a 700% increase in the amount of fertilisers used globally each year. But the difficulty with this is that it might not be sustainable. That means, can we still keep adding fertilisers to the soil and increasing the amount of fertiliser to the soil without it causing harm to the environment? We will reach a peak where we can keep adding fertiliser, but actually it's not going to increase the crop yield any more than it does already. So we produce all this food to feed the population of the world, but we do know that if food is not eaten and plant materials will start to decompose, and they're broken down by decomposers, and the examples of those could be bacteria and fungi, and as they break the materials down, rot them down, that process that they're doing that by is respiration. So that requires oxygen, it requires water, and it requires warmth so that those enzymes can work at the correct temperature. Plants, when they're well decayed, form compost. Compost, I'm sure you've heard, is used it's put back into the soil. It's high in nutrients. It's put back into the soil and is used by other plants for minerals to help them to grow. So you need to be able to calculate the rates of decomposition using an equation. It's nice and simple. So the rate of decomposition is the mass lost divided by the number of days. So we've got an example here. So the mass of 5 strawberries was 153 grams. After being in a compost bin for 10 days, their mass was 37 grams. Calculate the rate of decomposition of the strawberries. See if you can have a go. Pause the video. Okay, hopefully you've had a try. So let's look first of all at the mass lost. So that is 153 grams minus 37 grams. So the mass that has been lost in total is 116 grams. And then we divide that by the number of days, which was 10. And so we can say that 11.6 grams per day has been lost. So that is our decomposition rate. So remember the units there, it's grams per day. So the final thing you need to know about is about food preservation. So we've created all this food, we've grown all this food. So now we're looking at ways that we can stop the food from decaying or decomposing. And so we've got 5 different methods here that are used. The first one, cold storage, we can freeze things, we can make them cold. And what that does is it slows down the diffusion of reactants onto enzymes and the products off enzymes, and so that slows down decomposition and the rates of reaction. It stops those fungi and those bacteria from growing and from reproducing. We've got dried or salted foods. Salted food is doing the same thing as drying food. Basically, it removes water from the food, and because we need water for chemical reactions to occur, it means again that those decomposers can't undertake those chemical reactions of decomposition and respiration. We can put organisms in oil or in vinegar. Oil actually stops oxygen being able to get to the decomposers, so they can't then decompose the food. Vinegar creates really acidic conditions which stops those enzymes from working. If the pH becomes really low, the enzymes are denatured, and so these fungi and those bacteria can't decompose that food. We can irradiate food. That means that we can pass the food through radioactive kind of waves, And when we do that, that actually kills off any bacteria or fungi which were present. The foods are then packaged to prevent organisms from getting back in against them. The other thing, and this you probably don't know that this happens, but when you look in a supermarket and you get lettuce or fresh produce in packages, actually what's happened is there is no oxygen in those bags. That lettuce in that picture there has been stored with either nitrogen or carbon dioxide. And because there's therefore no oxygen around, the decomposers can no longer rot the food down.